Hello and welcome to Analyzing Trends. Today we embark on a journey that intersects the foundational elements of sport, identity, and design. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Why sport? Why athletes? Isn't this just another arena of strategy and competition? Well, I'd argue it's far more profound than that. It's, almost poetically, the playing field where societal changes reveal themselves most vividly. Athletes, you see, aren't just performers. They're mirrors of culture, signposts of where we've been, and, intriguingly, indicators of where we might be headed. They embody values, challenge norms, and, in doing so, shape our collective imagination. From the bold protests of Muhammad Ali to the rise of AI-powered competitors in the distant future, the athlete serves as a kind of cultural signal. Now, there's a particular framework that helps us disentangle this complexity. It's called the future's cone. Imagine, if you will, not a straight path, but a widening cone of possibility. At its core are projected futures, the things we can reasonably expect. Further out, we encounter probable trends shaped by current trajectories. Beyond these lie the possible scenarios, more speculative, yes, but entirely plausible. And hovering at the edges, we have the wildcards, those futures that disrupt all assumptions. But why does any of this matter? Well, sport helps us interrogate bigger questions. How are we redefining identity? What role does technology play in shaping autonomy and control? And perhaps most importantly, how do justice and ethics evolve when the very rules of competition begin to shift? The beauty of diving into these subcultures is how they unearth the tensions we often overlook. Competition isn't just about who's fastest or strongest, it's a stage for exploring everything from technological affordances to moral imperatives. So as we delve into this expansive timeline of athletic transformation, we're really asking who we are, not just as players or fans, but as designers of the future itself. To understand the future subcultures of sport, we first need to examine where we've traveled, an unraveling timeline of athletic identities from the 1970s to today, each decade carrying its own ideological weight, its own design logic. The 1970s were a powerful moment when athletes weren't just competitors, they were activists. Think of Muhammad Ali, the seismic reverberations of Title IX, or the iconic Black Power salute at the '68 Olympics. Back then, sport was undeniably political. By stepping into the arena, you weren't just an athlete, you were a voice, a symbol, protest and performance fused. But of course, tensions simmered. Authenticity clashed with the creeping shadows of commercial co-optation. How do you balance a moral stance with the growing allure of market influence? Then came the 1980s, a monumental shift. This was the media era where icons like Michael Jordan weren't merely players, they became brands. Nike swooshed in, and suddenly visibility wasn't just political anymore, it was commercial, slick, and pervasive. One could argue the team vanished behind the curtain of individual celebrity. Ego began its dance with team dynamics, and that tension transformed the way we saw athletes. By the 1990s, the narrative turned towards performance maximalism. Athletes began pushing boundaries, sometimes unnervingly far. Steroids, X Games, bodies became battlegrounds of risk and dominance, almost theatrical in their spectacle. But here lies the conundrum. How far is too far? Enhancement had no clear ethical map. The relentless pursuit of dominance introduced biases, spectacle over substance, and left us grappling with the price of victory. As we stumbled into the 2000s, a strange hybrid emerged. Athletes weren't just players anymore, they became creators, influencers, pioneers of a digital landscape. They streamed, they gamed, they interacted with fans on a molecular level, but with access came new dilemmas. Are we witnessing intimacy, or is this an illusion, carefully curated? That screen might bridge athletes and audiences, but it also amplifies a gap. How authentic is a connection sculpted by algorithms? By the time we reached the 2010s, the athlete had become a platform. Kaepernick kneeling, NIL reforms, mental health advocacy. These weren't sideline issues anymore. As athletes expanded their voices to systemic critiques, the burden of advocacy grew heavier. Trapped between burnout and agency, the platformed athlete reflected the larger systemic exhaustion of our cultural moment. And now here we are in the 2020s, a decade marked by augmented performers. Data is treasure. AI wearables are the norm. Athletes own their training through the eyes of machines, optimizing sovereignty, or so they think. The reality? Surveillance capitalism lurks as autonomy's invisible adversary. If athletes are defined by numbers, who owns the math? Who owns their identity? To imagine where the athlete is heading, we need to fundamentally shift our understanding of time. The future isn't a single path extending forward in a straight line. It's a dynamic field where multiple timelines are always unfolding. Possibility radiates in many directions. Just as there are many possible futures, there are also many possible histories that inform them. Both are constantly being rewritten by how we interpret the present. That's where the futures cone comes in. This framework helps us structure a spectrum of trajectories, from probable outcomes to provocative, alternative scenarios. Picture it as a widening cone, its base anchored in the now, expanding outward to encompass everything from the likely to the wild and unexpected. It's not about prediction, it's about mapping possibility. Culture plays a pivotal role in shaping how that cone unfolds. It informs which futures feel plausible, desirable, or even imaginable. Culture doesn't just live inside the cone, it helps stretch its boundaries. Let's start in the core, with projected futures, the scenarios most tethered to today. Here we find NIL entrepreneurs. NIL, short for name, image, and likeness, refers to the rights athletes now have to profit from their personal brand, something once off-limits under NCAA rules. These entrepreneurs are redefining what it means to be an athlete, treating their careers like branded ecosystems. They're not just players, they're CEOs of their own identity portfolios. But then we also encounter biometric athletes, competitors whose bodies function as real-time data loops. Imagine suits that adjust muscle performance on the fly or AI systems that coach them moment to moment. On paper, it sounds utopian, but if your value is reduced to data streams, who holds the copyright on you? That's where the cracks appear. As we step further along, we encounter probable futures shaped by the societal forces building right now. Here, the cross-sport nomad thrives, athletes who reject specialization in favor of polymath mastery. Sport becomes fluid, dynamic. Infrastructure will need to adapt, of course. Stadiums might resemble modular film sets, constantly shifting to keep pace. And then there are legacy builders, athletes who look backward to move forward. They reclaim heritage games, ancient rituals, breathing life into traditions that connect communities in new ways. A basketball game isn't just a game, it's part cultural ceremony, part competitive spectacle. Isn't that just extraordinary to imagine? But now let's stretch the boundaries a little further and explore the possible futures. At this stage, sport begins to untether from our usual notions. Earthless Olympians emerge, competing in zero gravity. Imagine events on a lunar platform or an orbital station. The physics alone would redefine sport as we know it. And then there are the mind athletes. Think of competitions not in speed or strength but in memory, focus, and cognitive endurance. What would it take to cheer for someone holding a complex thought the longest? Could AR or neurogames transform fandom itself? Finally, we arrive at the edge, the wildcard futures, the places where assumptions dissolve. Here we encounter Extinction Games athletes. They don't compete in million-dollar stadiums, but rather in hyperlocal, post-collapse environments. These survival sports could become expressions of resilience, rehearsals for a new kind of societal belonging. And let's not forget sentient sim athletes, completely synthetic beings with fan bases just as impassioned as any we see today. Their charm would be coded, their victories pre-written by programmers. But would that make the emotions, the investment, any less real? So, here we are, at the brink of a future that's as exciting as it is uncertain. If the evolution of athletic subcultures has taught us anything, it's that design is never just about function. It's about values, intentions, and the narratives we wish to carry forward. The question isn't just what we build, but why and for whom. And that's where the future gets its texture. Let's begin with the physical infrastructure, urban planning. To support the next generation of athletes, our built environments need to be as responsive and agile as the athletes themselves. Climate-adaptive stadiums that shift function with weather patterns, or community needs, modular training hubs that move with events or populations. These are no longer speculative ideas but emerging design imperatives. In the public realm, the transformation is just as critical. Parks and open spaces integrate augmented layers where physical activity intersects with cognitive development. A morning jog becomes a neurotraining loop, stimulating memory, reaction time, and focus through ambient challenges embedded in the landscape. Here, design operates not as a backdrop, but as a participant, fluid, intelligent, and increasingly shaped by both human and environmental input. But infrastructure isn't the only thing that needs a redesign. Policy, too, must evolve to meet the demands of a radically shifting athletic landscape. The rise of cognitive training, neural wearables, and immersive performance environments introduces new ethical frontiers. Enter neuroethics boards, interdisciplinary panels composed of neuroscientists, ethicists, legal scholars, and former athletes, responsible for defining the boundaries of cognitive enhancement. Where does training end and augmentation begin? What constitutes a fair advantage? At the same time, athlete data must be protected as a form of personal sovereignty. Identity isn't just about image rights anymore, it's also biometric signatures, neural feedback patterns, performance analytics. Athlete data ownership charters could serve as living documents that define who controls, accesses, and benefits from these metrics. Without such safeguards, athletes risk becoming products of surveillance rather than subjects of their own development. And as athletes increasingly take on roles as advocates, creators, and entrepreneurs, mental health can no longer be treated as an afterthought. Performance now includes emotional labor, online visibility, and constant self-branding. What protocols are in place to protect against burnout, harassment, or the psychological toll of hyperexposure? We need systems that are proactive, not reactive, mental health infrastructures that scale with the complexity of modern athletic life. The rules of the game must evolve, not just on the field, but across the legal, ethical, and emotional terrain that defines what it means to perform in a hyper-connected world. And then, of course, there's the technology itself. The frontier of innovation isn't only about pushing the limits of human performance, it's also about reimagining how stories are told, experienced, and owned. Future-facing tech must serve both function and meaning. This means building co-created, athlete-owned platforms where performance data, personal narrative, and cultural identity intersect. In these spaces, training isn't just preparation, it becomes a form of expression and connection, blurring the line between practice and performance, audience and community. Bio-integrated gear plays a critical role here. We're talking about wearable technologies that go beyond simple tracking, tools that respond dynamically to the athlete's emotional and physiological state. These are systems attuned to stress, motivation, focus, capable of offering real-time feedback not just on effort, but on well-being. Emotion-driven design becomes central, making the gear feel less like equipment and more like a collaborator. At the same time, mixed reality formats will reshape how we engage with sport altogether. These hybrid environments dissolve the boundary between physical and digital space, embedding ritual, narrative, and spectacle into every moment. Whether it's a training session streamed through AR lenses or a competition framed within a shared, virtual physical arena, the experience becomes layered, immersive, and participatory. These aren't just games, they're events that feel mythic and immediate, rooted in ancient gestures but unfolding through futuristic forms. In this context, technology isn't just an accessory to athleticism, it's the medium through which new forms of identity, community, and meaning are created. In the end, it's all interconnected. Stadiums, policy frameworks, cognitive wearables, they're tools, yes, but they're also expressions of our broader cultural priorities. And what are those priorities? Well, they're still up for grabs, aren't they? Will sport be a celebration of humanity's adaptability? Will it tackle questions of equity and autonomy with the honesty they deserve? Or will we allow it to become a mirror for unexamined power, a playground for surveillance and commodification? As we stand on the threshold of this new era, I'm reminded that while the games change, the need to play, to push limits, to redefine what's possible, remains as vital as ever. Athletes may no longer compete on grass, they may not even have bodies in the conventional sense, but they will still strive, still inspire, still bring us closer to the heart of what it means to be human. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most compelling game of all. So, on that note, this is your Analyzing Trends host, reminding you to look closely at the stadiums of tomorrow, not just for the competition, but for the world they reveal. Stay curious, stay inspired, and as always, stay in motion. Until next time, farewell, and thank you for listening.